The refugee leader's name was difficult for human tongues to pronounce, so he told them to call him Elder Quan. He came aboard the Silent Echo with 2 of his people, moving carefully in the artificial gravity that felt different from their own ship's systems. Elder Quan was tall and thin, with skin that changed color slightly as he spoke. His species had evolved on a world with 3 suns, and their emotions showed through shifts in their skin tone. Right now, his skin was the deep, blue-gray that meant fear and sadness. "We have been running for 8 cycles, Elder Quan said through Park's translation system. "Our world was in the outer rim of the galaxy, far from the major civilizations. We thought we were safe there." Dr. Yoonji Hye sat across from him, taking notes on everything he said. She had studied hundreds of alien cultures, but she had never heard of Elder Quan's species before. That was strange because her job was to know about all the intelligent life in the galaxy. "What happened to your world?" Yoon asked gently. Elder Quan's skin shifted to a darker shade of blue. "The Devourers came. At first we thought they were just another spacefaring species. They sent probes to study our system. We tried to communicate with them, but they never answered our messages." He paused and his skin became almost black. "Then they started taking our sun apart." Captain Lee leaned forward. "Taking it apart? How?" "Piece by piece," Elder Quan said. "They built massive machines around our star and began extracting its matter, not to use it for energy like normal species do, but to feed it into something else, something that grew larger each day." Park was recording everything, but she also had questions. "What did these machines look like?" Elder Quan gestured to one of his companions who activated a small device. A 3-dimensional image appeared in the air above the table. It showed a structure that wrapped around a star like a metal shell, with thousands of tubes extending outward. "We had never seen technology like this," Elder Quan continued. "Our scientists studied it from a safe distance. They determined that the machines were not extracting energy from our sun. They were converting the star's matter into something else entirely." Kim Tae-woo studied the image with professional interest. As an engineer, he could appreciate the complexity of what he was seeing, even if he didn't understand it. "Converting it into what?" "More machines," Elder Quan said simply. "Each piece of our sun that they consumed became part of their growing collective. By the time we realized what was happening, half of our sun was gone." The humans exchanged glances. This was beyond anything they had ever heard of. Even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy treated stars as natural resources to be carefully managed, not as raw materials to be consumed. "How long did you have to evacuate?" Lee asked. 3 local days, Elder Quan replied. "When a star loses half its mass, the remaining planets become unstable very quickly. We managed to save perhaps 1% of our population." The silence that followed was heavy. The humans were trying to imagine the scale of the disaster. Billions of people lost in 3 days, and only because their star was being eaten by machines. "But you weren't the only ones," Yoon said. It wasn't a question. Elder Quan's skin shifted to a muddy brown color that meant grim confirmation. "No, we joined other refugee fleets as we fled. The Devourers had already consumed 17 star systems in our region of the galaxy. Each time they grew larger and more capable." Han Sol had been quiet during most of the conversation, but now she spoke up. "Where are they now?" "Moving toward the galaxy's center," Elder Quan said. "They follow a pattern. They consume the outer systems first, using the matter to build more machines. Then they move inward, where the stars are more densely packed and they can consume more quickly." Park was already working on her computers, mapping the locations that Elder Quan had described. As the pattern became clear, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. "Captain," Park said quietly, "if they continue this pattern, they'll reach the major civilized worlds in less than 50 years. 50 years, Kim repeated. That's not much time to prepare for something like this. Elder Quan's skin became a pale yellow that meant bitter amusement. "We thought the same thing. We tried to warn the major civilizations. We sent messages to the Axiom Empire, the Forge Confederation, even the Trading Guild. We begged them to listen to us. What did they say? Lee asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. They didn't say anything, Elder Quan replied. They never answered our messages. We were just refugees from the Outer Rim, from worlds they had never heard of. Why would they listen to us? Dr. Yoon felt a familiar anger rise in her chest. She had seen this pattern before in her studies of galactic politics. The major civilizations only paid attention to each other. They ignored smaller species unless those species had something valuable to offer. Did you try to approach them directly? Yoon asked. Elder Quan's companion, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His translator rendered his voice as rough and bitter. My name is Namgil. I was our diplomatic representative. I traveled to the capital worlds of the major civilizations. Namgil's skin was scarred in patterns that showed he had survived something terrible. The Axioms wouldn't let me pass their outer security stations. They said my people were not on their approved contact list. The Forge military thought I was a spy and nearly imprisoned me. The traders wanted to know what I was selling before they would speak to me. So no one listened, Lee said. Worse than that, Namgil continued. When I finally found officials who would speak to me, they didn't believe what I was telling them. They said it was impossible for machines to consume stars. They said I must be mistaken, or lying, or suffering from trauma that made me see things that weren't real. Park looked up from her mapping program. How many refugee fleets are there now? We estimate 43 separate groups, Elder Quan said. Perhaps 2 million survivors total from 28 different star systems, all fleeing toward the galaxy's edge, trying to stay ahead of the Devourers. And they're all trying to warn people? Every day, Namgil said. We broadcast warnings on every frequency we can access. We send detailed technical data about the Devourers machines. We provide coordinates and timelines showing their progress toward inhabited systems. But no one listens, Han Sol said. Elder Quan's skin shifted to the deep blue of sadness again. No one listens. The major civilizations are too busy with their own wars and politics. The smaller worlds don't have the technology to verify what we're telling them, so they assume we're making it up to get aid and sympathy. Captain Lee stood up and walked to the viewing port. Outside, he could see the refugee ships hanging in space like broken toys. Each one represented thousands of people who had lost everything, and who were now trying desperately to save others from the same fate. Show me, Lee said suddenly. Show you what? Elder Quan asked. Show me proof, Lee said. Show me something that will make the major civilizations believe you. Elder Quan and Namgil exchanged a look that needed no translation. We can show you the ruins of our homeworld, Elder Quan said. What's left of it? But the journey is dangerous. The Devourers sometimes return to systems they've already consumed, looking for resources they might have missed. Lee looked at his crew. Park was already nodding. Kim was running calculations on his engineering console. Han was plotting possible courses. Dr. Yoon was organizing her notes, preparing for what would be the most important cultural documentation of her career. Set course for Elder Quan's homeworld, Lee told Han. Captain, Kim said quietly, if we're detected by these Devourers, then we'll use what humans do best, Lee replied. We'll be quiet, we'll listen, and we'll learn. And maybe, just maybe, we'll figure out how to make the galaxy listen too. As the silent echo changed course toward the ruins of a dead star system, none of them knew that they were beginning the most important mission in human history. They were about to see proof of a threat that could destroy every living thing in the galaxy, and they were the only ones listening. The journey to Elder Quan's dead homeworld took 6 days. During that time, the silent echo picked up more refugee signals than Park's computers could properly catalog. The galaxy's edges were full of fleeing ships, all heading away from something terrible in the center. Dr. Yoon spent those 6 days learning everything she could from Elder Quan and his people. She discovered that the refugees weren't just random survivors. They were the remains of an entire network of civilizations that had once thrived in the galaxy's outer regions. We weren't primitive, Elder Quan explained as Yoon recorded his words. Our worlds had technology, art, philosophy. We had been peacefully trading with each other for thousands of years, but we were quiet about it. We didn't broadcast our achievements across the galaxy like the major civilizations do. This made sense to the humans. Earth's own history was full of advanced civilizations that had kept to themselves, focusing on their own development rather than expansion and conquest. The Devourers found us anyway, Namgil added. His scars seemed darker when he talked about the machines. They don't care if you're loud or quiet, they just consume everything. When they finally arrived at Elder Quan's former star system, the humans understood why no one believed the refugees' stories. What they saw was impossible according to everything they knew about physics. The star was gone. Not destroyed. Not collapsed into a black hole, just gone. In its place was a perfectly spherical structure made of some kind of dark material. The structure was exactly where the star should have been, and it was roughly the same size, but it wasn't giving off any light or heat. "What is that thing?" Kim whispered. "We don't know," Elder Quan said. "It appeared after they finished consuming our sun. Our scientists think it might be some kind of processing station, but we've never been able to get close enough to study it properly." Han was running scans from a safe distance. "Captain, I'm detecting some kind of energy field around that structure. It's not like anything in our databases." Park was monitoring communication frequencies, but she wasn't picking up any signals from the structure. "It's completely silent," she reported. "No radio waves, no energy broadcasts, nothing. The planets that had once orbited Elder Quan's sun were still there, but they were frozen and dead. Without their star's heat and light, they had become ice balls floating in empty space. 3 billion people lived on the second planet," Elder Quan said quietly. "It was our main industrial world. Now it's just ice and rock." Dr. Yoon was taking measurements and recording everything she could. This would be crucial evidence when they tried to convince the major civilizations that the Devourer threat was real. "We need to get closer," Captain Lee said. "Captain, that might not be wise," Kim warned. "We don't know how their detection systems work." "That's exactly why we need to get closer," Lee replied. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." Elder Quan's skin shifted to an alarmed orange color. "Please reconsider. 2 of our scout ships tried to approach the structure after it appeared. They were captured and pulled inside. We never heard from them again." But Lee had made his decision. "Han, take us closer. Kim, maximum stealth mode. Park, monitor all frequencies for any sign that we've been detected." The silent echo moved slowly toward the dark sphere. As they got closer, Kim's instruments began picking up more details about the structure's composition. "It's not solid," Kim reported. "The outer shell is some kind of energy field holding together millions of smaller machines. They're all connected in a network, sharing power and information. Like a hive mind," Dr. Yoon observed. "They were less than 1,000,000 kilometers from the structure when Park's instruments detected movement. Dozens of small objects were leaving the sphere and heading in different directions." "Probes," Elder Quan said, his skin now pure white with terror. "They send them out to search for new resources. If one of them detects us, how fast can they move?" Han asked, her hand hovering over the navigation controls. "Faster than any ship we've ever built," Namgil replied. Lee made a quick decision. "Han, get us out of here. Full reverse, maximum quiet running." The silent echo began moving away from the structure, using its specialized engines to avoid creating any detectable energy signature. But one of the probes was heading in their direction. Kim was monitoring the probe's approach with growing concern. "It's following a search pattern, systematic, methodical. It'll detect us in about 10 minutes. Can we go to faster speed?" Lee asked. "Not without being detected," Kim replied. "The probe will notice any increase in our energy output." Park was watching her communication screens when she noticed something odd. "Captain, I'm picking up signals from the other refugee ships. They're coordinating some kind of distraction." Through the viewing port, they could see distant flashes of light as the refugee ships activated their engines and began moving in different directions. The probe that had been approaching the silent echo suddenly changed course and headed toward the larger energy signatures. "They're drawing it away from us," Dr. Yoon said with admiration. Elder Kwan's skin was cycling through colors that showed mixed emotions, pride in his people's bravery, fear for their safety. "This is how we've survived," he said. "We help each other." The silent echo escaped without being detected, but the experience had changed everyone aboard. They had seen the enemy now, and it was more terrifying than anything they had imagined. "We have to warn Earth," Park said as they reached safe distance. "We have to warn everyone," Lee corrected. "But first we need more information." Over the next several days, Captain Lee made a decision that went against all of his training and orders. Instead of returning to Earth immediately, he began coordinating with the refugee fleets. The Silent Echo became a mobile base for gathering information about the Devourers. Dr. Yoon interviewed survivors from different worlds, building a comprehensive picture of how the Devourers operated. Kim studied the technology that different refugee species had developed for avoiding detection. Park began building a communication network that connected refugee fleets across thousands of light years. What they learned was disturbing. The Devourers had been consuming star systems for at least 50 years, but they had started with the galaxy's most isolated regions. The major civilizations had no idea what was happening because they didn't pay attention to the outer rim worlds. "It's the perfect strategy," Kim realized. "Start with the targets no one cares about. Build your strength, then move toward more valuable targets when you're strong enough to take them." Meanwhile, the major civilizations were doing exactly what the Devourers wanted them to do. The Axiom. Empire was building larger military fleets and broadcasting their positions across the galaxy. The Forge Confederation was establishing new colonies and advertising their locations to attract settlers. The Trading Guild was creating shipping routes that connected every major system. "They're making themselves easy targets," Dr. Yoon observed. Elder Kwan confirmed her fears. "The Devourers are attracted to energy signatures. The louder a civilization broadcasts its presence, the sooner it will be targeted. This was why the refugees had survived as long as they had. Their technology was designed to be quiet and efficient, not impressive and powerful. They used minimal energy and avoided broadcasting their positions. It was also why humans had been overlooked so far. Earth's exploration philosophy emphasized stealth and observation over expansion and domination. Human ships were designed to be invisible, and human colonies were small and self-sufficient. We're accidentally doing everything right, Lee realized, but that advantage wouldn't last long. Earth's government was already planning larger exploration fleets and more visible colonies. If they continued on their current path, they would eventually attract the Devourers' attention. Captain Lee faced the most difficult decision of his career. He could return to Earth and deliver his report through normal channels. The information would take months to filter up through the military hierarchy, and by then it might be too late. Or he could break every regulation in the human exploration manual and begin coordinating a resistance movement using refugee knowledge and human technology. "What do you think?" he asked his crew. Park didn't hesitate. "The refugees have been trying to warn people for years, and no one listened. If we go through official channels, the same thing will happen," Kim agreed. "The major civilizations won't believe the threat is real until the Devourers are already attacking their core worlds. By then, it'll be too late to organize any kind of defense." Han was studying star charts that showed Devourer movement patterns. Based on their current progress, they'll reach the first major colony worlds in 37 years. That's not enough time to evacuate entire civilizations. Yoon had the most surprising opinion. "I think we should listen to the refugees. They've been living with this threat longer than anyone. They know how to survive it." Captain Lee looked out at the refugee ships that surrounded them. Millions of people who had lost everything, but who were still trying to save others from the same fate. People who had been ignored and dismissed by the very civilizations they were trying to help. "Then we help them," Lee decided. "We help them, and we learn from them. And maybe together, we can find a way to save the galaxy." The Silent Echo would not be returning to Earth anytime soon. 3 months after first contact with Elder Kwan, the Silent Echo had become something no human ship had ever been before. It was the center of a communication network that spanned half the galaxy, connecting refugee fleets that had never been able to talk to each other before. Park Soo-jin hadn't slept properly in weeks. She spent 18 hours a day managing communication relays, translation protocols, and information sharing systems. Her small communication station had expanded to fill an entire section of the ship. "We now have direct contact with 67 refugee fleets," she reported to Captain Lee during their daily briefing. "That represents survivors from 43 different star systems and at least a dozen different species. Each refugee group brought new information about the Devourers. Some had witnessed different types of machines. Others had observed different consumption patterns. A few had even managed to capture pieces of Devourer technology. Dr. Yoon Ji-hae was having the time of her life, and she felt guilty about it. While studying the greatest disaster in galactic history, she was also making the greatest anthropological discoveries of her career. The refugee cultures were unlike anything the major civilizations had encountered. "They're not primitive at all," she explained to the senior staff. "Their technology is just designed around different priorities. Where major civilizations focus on power and visibility, the refugees developed efficiency and stealth." One refugee group, survivors from a world called Gentle Harbor, had developed engines that produced almost no detectable energy signature. Another group had created hull materials that could absorb sensor waves instead of reflecting them. A third group had perfected hydroponic systems that could feed entire populations using minimal resources. Kim Tae-woo was like a child in a toy store. Every day brought new engineering concepts that challenged everything he thought he knew about technology. "Look at this," he said, showing Captain Lee a device that one of the refugee engineers had brought aboard. "It's a power generator that runs on ambient cosmic radiation. The energy output is low, but it never needs fuel and produces no waste heat." "How efficient is it?" "Efficient enough to run life support for a ship this size indefinitely," Kim replied. "The major civilizations never developed anything like this because they've always had access to massive energy sources. But when you're running from star-eating machines, you learn to make do with very little." The refugees weren't just sharing technology. They were sharing something far more valuable: knowledge about how to survive when everything you know is gone. Elder Kwan had introduced Captain Lee to a woman named Bae Young-sik, though that wasn't her original name. She had been a military strategist on her homeworld before the Devourers came. Now she was the closest thing the refugees had to a supreme commander. "We don't fight the Devourers," Bae explained during a strategy meeting. "Fighting them is suicide. They convert destroyed ships into more machines. Every weapon you fire at them makes them stronger." "Then how do you stop them?" Lee asked. "You don't stop them," Bae replied. "You survive them. You stay hidden, you preserve what you can, and you wait." "Wait for what?" Bae's expression was grim. "For them to finish consuming the galaxy and move on to the next one." This was not the answer Lee had been hoping for. "How long would that take?" "Based on their current consumption rate, approximately 800 years, Bae said. "Give or take a century." Han Sol looked up from the star chart she had been studying. "What about the major civilizations? Won't they fight back?" "Of course. They will," Bae replied. "The Axiom Empire has the largest military fleet in the galaxy. The Forge Confederation has weapons that can destroy planets. The Trading Guild has resources beyond imagination. They'll fight with everything they have." "And they'll lose," Elder Kwan added sadly, "because they don't understand what they're fighting. They think the Devourers are just another enemy that can be defeated with superior firepower." Dr. Yoon had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now she spoke up. What if there was another way? Everyone looked at her. "What do you mean?" Lee asked. "I've been studying the cultural records that the refugees have preserved," Yoon said. "Stories, songs, traditional knowledge passed down through generations. Most of it seems like folklore, but some of it contains very specific technical information." She activated a recording device, and the sound of alien voices filled the meeting room. It was a song, or something like a song, with complex harmonies and mathematical rhythms. "This is from a refugee group that joined us 2 weeks ago," Yoon explained. At first I thought it was just a traditional mourning song for their lost homeworld, but when I analyzed the mathematical patterns in the lyrics, I found something interesting. The song continued and Yoon highlighted certain passages. These sections contain precise measurements and coordinates, instructions for finding something. They call the Silent Gardens. What are the Silent Gardens? Lee asked. I'm not sure, Yoon admitted, but according to the song, they're places where the hungry machines cannot hear the songs of life. The refugees who taught me this song say it's just an old story, but the technical details are too precise to be fantasy. Kim was already analyzing the coordinates. These measurements correspond to real locations, specific star systems in the galactic outer rim. Dead systems, Han added, studying the navigation data. Stars that burned out naturally millions of years ago. Bae Young-sik was interested now. Dead systems would have no energy signature, nothing to attract the Devourer's attention. Exactly, Yoon said. And according to the song, the Silent Gardens aren't just hiding places. They're repositories. Places where knowledge and culture can be preserved until the danger passes. Elder Kwan's skin was shifting through colors that showed excitement and hope. There are other songs, he said suddenly. Other stories that my people dismissed as mythology. Stories about the ancients who faced the Devourers before and found ways to preserve themselves. Park looked up from her communication station. Before? You mean this has happened before? According to the stories, yes, Elder Kwan replied. The Devourers appear every million years or so, consume most of the galaxy's civilizations, then move on to other galaxies. The few survivors hide until it's safe to emerge and rebuild. This was the most important information they had discovered yet. If the Devourers were a recurring threat, then someone, somewhere, had figured out how to survive them on a large scale. We need to find these Silent Gardens, Lee decided. Captain, Bae warned, if these places exist, they might already be occupied. The survivors from previous cycles might still be there. Then we'll introduce ourselves politely, Lee replied. Humans are good at that. Over the next several days, the refugee network began sharing more traditional knowledge. Stories that had been dismissed as folklore were re-examined for technical content. Songs that seemed like simple entertainment were analyzed for hidden instructions. What emerged was a picture of a galaxy that had faced this threat many times before. Each cycle, the advanced civilizations were consumed by the Devourers. Bilikandi, survivors went into hiding, preserving knowledge and culture in secret locations. When the Devourers finally moved on, the survivors emerged to rebuild. It's like a forest fire, Dr. Yoon realized. The big trees get burned down, but the seeds survive underground. When the fire passes, they grow into new trees. Except this, forest fire happens every million years, Kim added. The refugees began preparing for the longest journey any of them had ever undertaken. The coordinates from the traditional songs pointed to locations at the very edge of the galaxy, in regions that had never been explored by the major civilizations. Captain Lee sent a message back to Earth, though he knew it would take months to arrive. The message contained everything they had learned about the Devourers, along with his decision to investigate the Silent Gardens. We may be out of contact for an extended period, he recorded. But if we're right about this, we might be able to save not just humanity, but every intelligent species in the galaxy. The refugees have been trying to warn us for decades. Now it's time for us to help them find the solution. The Silent Echo began the longest journey of its career, accompanied by a fleet of refugee ships carrying the survivors of dozens of dead civilizations. They were heading toward coordinates from ancient songs, looking for hiding places that might or might not exist. Behind them, the major galactic civilizations continued their politics and their wars, completely unaware that their entire way of life was about to end. But ahead of them, at the edge of known space, there might be hope. The hope that someone long ago had figured out how to preserve life and knowledge until the Great Hunger passed. The Whisper network that Park had built would carry this hope across the galaxy, connecting the survivors and the forgotten with those who still remembered how to listen. The journey to the Silent Gardens took 8 months. When they finally arrived at the coordinates from the ancient songs, Captain Lee and his crew found something that changed their understanding of everything. The star system was dead. just as the navigation charts had indicated. Its sun had burned out millions of years ago, leaving behind a cold white dwarf that gave off barely any light. But hidden in the asteroid belt around the dead star, protected by fields that made them invisible, to most sensors were structures that defied explanation. Cities, Dr. Yoon whispered as she studied the sensor readings. Entire cities built inside hollowed-out asteroids. The structures were old, older than any civilization currently active in the galaxy, but they weren't abandoned. As the silent echo approached, following the specific approach patterns encoded in the refugee songs, the cities began to respond. Lights appeared where there had been darkness. Communication signals reached out to the approaching ships, and voices, speaking in languages that Park's translation systems had never heard before, welcomed them to the silent gardens. Elder Kwan's skin was cycling through colors that showed wonder and disbelief. "The stories were true," he said. "The ancients are still here." The being who greeted them called herself Curator Oh Minho, though like the refugees, her name had been adapted for easier pronunciation. She was tall and graceful, with features that seemed to shift slightly as the light changed. Her species had evolved in the darkness between stars, and they had been the guardians of the silent gardens for over 10 million years. "We have been expecting you," Curator O said as she welcomed the refugees aboard her city ship. "Not you specifically, but survivors from this cycle. The patterns are always the same." She led them through corridors that were filled with wonders. Libraries that contained the preserved knowledge of hundreds of extinct civilizations. Gardens where plants from dead worlds continued to grow under artificial suns. Museums that displayed art and technology from species that had been consumed by the devourers eons ago. "This is our purpose," Curator O explained. "When each cycle ends, we emerge to gather the survivors and preserve what can be saved. When the new cycle begins, we help the survivors rebuild." Captain Lee had thousands of questions, but one was more urgent than the others. "How many cycles have there been?" "This will be the 47th, Curator O replied. "The devourers appear approximately every 1.2 million years. They consume until there is nothing left to consume efficiently, then they move on to other galaxies." "How long until this cycle ends?" "Based on their current consumption rate, approximately 600 years, Curator O said. "Give or take a century depending on how much resistance they encounter." Dr. Yoon was studying the preservation systems with growing amazement. "How do you keep all of this hidden?" "The same way you kept your ship hidden from us until you followed." "The proper approach," Curator O replied. "Technology that absorbs energy instead of reflecting it. Systems that redirect sensor waves instead of blocking them. The art of being invisible." Kim Tae-woo was examining the city's power systems. "These run on background radiation, just like the refugee generators, but on a massive scale. We learned long ago that survival requires efficiency," Curator O explained. "The civilizations that burn bright and loud are always the first to be consumed. Those that learn to live quietly in the dark are the ones that endure." This was why the major galactic civilizations had never encountered the silent gardens. They had never learned to look for things that didn't want to be found. They had never developed the patience to listen for whispers instead of shouts. But humans had. Human exploration philosophy had accidentally prepared them to find the one thing that could save the galaxy. "We want to help," Captain Lee said. "But 600 years is a long time. Most of the galaxy's current civilizations will be gone by then." Curator O's expression was sad but not hopeless. "Some will be consumed, yes, but some can be saved, if they are willing to learn. If they are willing to give up their pride and their noise and their need to be important." Over the following days, the human crew and the refugees learned about the true history of the galaxy. The Silent Gardens weren't just one hidden city, but a network of thousands of such places scattered throughout the galaxy's edge regions. Each was maintained by descendants of survivors from previous cycles. "We are the galaxy's memory," Curator O explained. "We remember the civilizations that came before. We preserve their knowledge, their art, their wisdom. And when the time is right, We share that knowledge with the new civilizations that emerge. The refugees were amazed to learn that their own ancestors might be represented in the gardens, archives. Species that they thought were extinct might have left descendants among the curators. Your people's engineering knowledge has been preserved here for over 3 million years, Curator O told Elder Quan. Your ancestors were among the survivors of the 19th cycle, but the most important discovery was still to come. Doctor, Yoon was studying the curator's historical records when she found something that made her call for Captain Lee immediately. Look at this, she said, showing him a file that contained detailed technical specifications. It's a communication system that can reach every part of the galaxy simultaneously, using quantum entanglement principles that we're only beginning to understand. What does it do? It's designed to coordinate a galaxy-wide stealth protocol, Yoon explained. When activated, it can guide entire civilizations into hiding simultaneously, using the same invisibility technology that protects the Silent Gardens. Captain Lee felt his pulse quicken. How long would it take to implement? For a civilization that's already prepared for it, a few months, Yoon replied. For civilizations that need to build new infrastructure, maybe a few years. And if the major galactic powers refuse to cooperate? Curator O had been listening to their conversation. Then they will be consumed, and we will preserve what we can of their knowledge for the next cycle. This is always the choice: adapt and survive, or maintain your pride and perish. But Captain Lee had a different idea. What if we don't wait for them to make that choice? What if we make it for them? Park looked up from her communication station where she had been studying the galaxy-wide communication system. You mean activate the stealth protocol without their permission? I mean save them whether they want to be saved or not, Lee replied. The refugees have been trying to warn them for decades, and they won't listen. Maybe it's time to stop asking for permission and start taking action. Kim was already analyzing the technical requirements. We'd need to place stealth generators at specific points throughout the galaxy. The refugee fleets could handle the outer regions, but the core civilizations... Leave the core civilizations to us, Captain Lee said. Humans are good at getting places quietly. Over the next several months, the largest stealth operation in galactic history began to take shape. The Silent Gardens provided the technology and coordination. The refugee fleets provided the knowledge of how to implement it. And humanity provided something that neither group had in sufficient quantity: ships that could penetrate deep into civilized space without being detected. The Silent Echo was just the beginning. Other human exploration vessels began receiving coded messages directing them to rendezvous points where they would receive new technology and new missions. The human fleet was small compared to the major galactic powers, but it was perfectly suited for the task at hand. Han Sol became the coordinator for the human side of the operation. She mapped insertion routes that would allow human ships to place stealth generators near major population centers without being detected by local defense systems. We'll have to work around their military patrols, their traffic control systems, their sensor networks, she explained to the assembled ship captains. But that's what we've been training for our entire careers. The most difficult part wasn't the technical challenge. It was the moral one. We're making a decision for billions of people without asking them, Dr. Yoon pointed out during one of their planning sessions. We're deciding that their civilizations need to be preserved, even if it means completely changing their way of life. The alternative is letting them all die, Captain Lee replied. The Devourers don't care about consent or cultural autonomy. They just consume. Elder Quan supported the human plan. My people tried asking for help. We tried warning them. We tried everything the polite way. They wouldn't listen. Now it's time to save them despite themselves. The operation took 3 years to complete. Human ships, now equipped with technology from the Silent Gardens, quietly visited every major civilization in the galaxy. They placed stealth generators near important planets, linked communication networks into the galaxy-wide quantum system, and prepared entire star systems to disappear at a moment's notice. The major civilizations never noticed. They were too busy with their own affairs, too focused on their own importance to pay attention to the quiet little ships that came and went like ghosts. When the stealth network was finally complete, Captain Lee sent one last message to the galaxy's political leaders. It was broadcast simultaneously on every communication frequency, in every known language. "This is Captain Lee Dae-ho of the human vessel Silent Echo," the message began. Captain Dae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of Earth's first interstellar ship, the Resilience. Through the large window, he could see the strange orange light of Alpha Centauri. After 2 years of travel, they had finally reached another star system. This was supposed to be humanity's greatest moment. The ship's alarm began to sound. "Captain, we have unknown contacts," said Lieutenant Bo-Ram Lee from her station. "Multiple ships, very large. They're coming straight toward us." Dae-ho felt his heart beat faster. Earth had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer. "How many ships?" 12, sir. Each one is at least 10 times bigger than us." Dr. Yoo-Jin Park looked up from her science station. She had spent years preparing for this moment, learning how humans might talk to aliens. But seeing real alien ships on her screen made her hands shake. "Captain, they're sending some kind of signal." "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared was unlike anything humans had ever seen. The being looked like it was made of crystal, tall and thin, with light flowing through its body, like water. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English, though its voice sounded like wind chimes. "Greetings, primitive species. I am Ambassador Vexthai of the Galactic Dominion. Your world has been selected for integration into our great empire. Please prepare for immediate surrender." Dae-ho blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say surrender?" "Yes. Do not worry. This is standard procedure. All new species must surrender so we can help them find their proper place in the galaxy. You will be taken care of." Dr. Yoo-Jin stepped forward. "Ambassador Vexthai, I'm Dr. Park. We're honored to meet you, but we didn't come here to surrender. We came to explore and maybe make friends." The crystal being tilted its head. Light flickered through its body in what might have been confusion. "Friends? I do not understand this word in this context. Superior species do not make friends with inferior ones. They guide them." "Who says we're inferior?" asked Commander Bo-Ram. "The Evolutionary Merit Index, of course. Your species has been analyzed. You are Category 9, barely intelligent. You use primitive chemical rockets and metal tools. Your brains are small, and you have no special abilities." Dae-ho felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "We'd like to speak with someone in charge." "I am in charge of primitive species integration, but if you insist, you may come aboard our vessel to meet with the Hegemony Council. They will explain your new role in the Dominion." An hour later, Dae-ho and Dr. Yoo-Jin found themselves in a massive chamber filled with strange beings. Some looked like giant insects, others like floating gas clouds, and some were just balls of energy that spoke without mouths. At the center sat the most impressive creature they had ever seen, a being that looked like it was made of liquid metal, constantly shifting and changing shape. "I am Senator Mordoon," the metal being said, its voice deep and booming. "I have overseen the integration of 47 species. This is always a happy day for primitive worlds." "Happy?" Dr. Yoo-Jin asked. "Of course. You no longer need to worry about making difficult decisions. We will tell you exactly what to do. Your world will be strip-mined for rare metals. Your people will be moved to agricultural planets where you can grow food for more advanced species. Some of your strongest individuals may be selected for labor colonies." Dae-ho felt like he had been punched in the stomach. "You want to destroy our planet and make us slaves?" Senator Mordoon's shape rippled, which might have been laughter. "Slaves, such a harsh word." "You will be productive members of galactic society, working in jobs suited to your abilities. And if we refuse?" The chamber became very quiet. Ambassador Vexthai stepped forward, light pulsing through his crystal body more rapidly. "Refuse? I do not understand." "It's a simple word," said Dae-ho. "It means no. We don't want your offer." Senator Mordoon's metal form stopped shifting. "This is impossible. No species has ever refused integration. Our psychological analysis shows that primitive species are always grateful to serve their superiors." "Doctor, Yujin looked around the chamber at all the alien faces staring at them. Maybe your analysis is wrong. Maybe we're not as primitive as you think. Impossible, said a new voice. From the shadows stepped the largest being in the room, ancient and covered in what looked like stone scales. I am High Curator Zelmoth. I have overseen 200 integrations over 3,000 years. The pattern is always the same. Primitive species see our power and immediately understand their place. Well, said Deho, I guess we're the first to break your pattern. High Curator Zelmoth moved closer, her massive form casting a shadow over the two humans. You do not understand. This is not a negotiation. This is how the galaxy works. The strong rule the weak, the advanced guide the primitive. This is the natural order. Says who? Asked Dr. Yujin. Says reality. Senator Mordoon's voice boomed through the chamber. Look around you. We have ships that cross the galaxy in days. We have weapons that can destroy stars. We have ruled 847 worlds for millennia. What do you have? Deho smiled. We have something you've apparently never encountered before. We have the word no. The aliens looked at each other in confusion. Ambassador Vextai spoke first. Perhaps they do not understand the consequences of refusal. Show them the fleet. The walls of the chamber became transparent, showing space around them. Hundreds of massive ships floated in formation, each one bristling with weapons and covered in armor that gleamed like mirrors. It was the most terrifying and beautiful sight the humans had ever seen. Impressive, said Dr. Yujin. But our answer is still no. High Curator Zelmoth leaned down until her massive head was level with the humans. You would choose death over service? We would choose freedom over slavery, replied Deho, even if it means fighting. Fighting? Senator Mordoon's form began shifting rapidly. You cannot fight us, you have nothing that could harm our ships. Maybe not, admitted Dr. Yujin. But we have something else you don't seem to understand. What is that? We have experience saying no to bullies. We've been doing it for thousands of years. The chamber erupted in what sounded like alien laughter. Ambassador Vextai stepped forward, his crystal body now pulsing with bright light. This is fascinating. A primitive species that does not recognize its place. Perhaps we should study them before integration. No study is needed, said High Curator Zelmoth. They are simply confused. Time will clear their minds. She turned to face the humans directly. You have 30 standard cycles to reconsider. Think carefully about your choice. No one has ever successfully resisted the Dominion. Then, I guess, we'll be the first, said Deho. As they were escorted back to their ship, Dr. Yujin whispered to her captain, Do you think we just made the biggest mistake in human history? Deho looked back at the massive alien fleet surrounding them. Maybe, but at least it was our choice to make. Back on the Resilience, they sent a message to Earth. We have made contact with an alien empire. They want us to surrender and become their workers. We told them no. Prepare for war. As their message traveled toward home at light speed, the Dominion fleet took position at the edge of the solar system. For the first time in 3,000 years, they faced a species that refused to bow down. Neither side knew what would happen next. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same.